Lunch family, welcome to our channel, or welcome back to our channel. For those of you that are new, I'm going to give a little backstory. I'm Justine.
I'm Sam.
And this is our 7-month-old daughter, Anna. Our channel is a family channel surrounding parenting, infertility, adoption, paths to parenthood, and family in general. And for those of you that don't know it or watch our other videos, it can kind of catch you up. After 3 years of infertility, we got miraculously pregnant with our daughter Anna, who is now 7 months old. But adoption was part of our journey. Leading up to that, we kind of got pregnant in the middle of adoption and then had to put our adoption on pause. And adoption is still something that we're passionate about and something that we still want to bring awareness to in this channel, especially because other families that struggle with infertility might have an adoption journey, and we want to educate people on different ways to become parents as well. And adoption, this is November's Adoption Awareness Month, and so we're kind of using this month to make a lot of videos educating about adoption. We started the last few weeks. You can check out those videos, I'll link them below, as well as some resources. But basically this week I thought we'd talk about what it is to get a profile call and what a profile call is and what part of the adoption that is. And then I am going to talk about our experience a little bit, as well as we're going to do some mock calls just so you guys can get the feel of what that's like. I guess Anna really likes my blazer. So we're going to do some mock calls at the end to kind of get you guys a feel. I don't want to share like real calls that we got and received during our journey, so I kind of made different scenarios that were, different scenarios that were similar or things that are realistic to what you would get on a profile call. And we're just going to do like a mock to kind of show people what that process is like. And so basically, after you get home study approved, you are what's considered a waiting family. You're basically waiting to be matched. You have gone through all the paperwork process of the adoption, all the background checks, all the home study, everything, and then you just wait to be matched. But throughout waiting to be matched, you can receive multiple profile calls, which are potential matches. And what happens is, we spoke about this in a previous video, where during your home study process, you fill out something called the adoption grid, and every agency uses a different version of the grid, but it's essentially asking you what you would be open to. And on the birth parent side, they also have things that they are looking for in their adoptive parents that they want to place their child with. And then us as potential adoptive parents, we also have a grid, and so that has to align, right?
And just to be clear, just because let's just have your grid and the placing parents are also grid also matches, it does not necessarily mean that you will still get a profile call, because you still have, there's a lot of statistical stuff that goes into it, like ratio, location, and other things that fall into that with other agency parameters.
Right, but in general, you can't get calls that don't match up to things that you're not open to, and then obviously you're not going to get a call if you don't match what the birth parents are looking for, is what I mean by the two grids have to match up in that way. And so once you become a waiting family and you get you have your grid, they have their grid, you're just kind of waiting for those profile calls. And then once you get them, you can decide based on what the agency tells you if you want to move forward with that case. And if you do, then the birth parent or the birth mother will see you guys as, let's say they're giving her 5 profiles, you would be one of the profiles if you said yes. So they like to talk to the potential adoptive parents first, because they like us to say if we're willing to take the case, if we're comfortable with all the information that they gave us on each case. And if we say yes, we're going to move forward, we're comfortable with all the health parameters and everything in the case, if we're comfortable with everything and we want to move forward, then we will become part of that batch that gets shown to the birth mother or the birth parent. And then they will kind of narrow it down. Usually a birth parent would either choose one from that big pile, or sometimes narrow it down to like 2 or 3, and then kind of get to know those parents better. And then essentially you would either get a call, but at the end of that, you would either get a call stating that this birth mother went with a different family, or you would get the call that you have been matched. That would be a match call, right? After you have been matched. And so before we get into it, And before we get into the scenarios, just because I did 4 different scenarios and I kind of did them both a mixture of the two, there's 2 different placement calls that you can get, and 2 different placement calls that as a potential adoptive parent you should be preparing for, and they're very different, right? So there's something called, there's the first one, which is probably what more people are familiar with, because it's what we were familiar with before we actually learned a little bit more about the process, which is getting a call that an expectant mother, a birth mother, is X months pregnant, right? Like 6 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant, looking to do an adoption plan, and then they'll tell you information. And based on that information, you and your partner or yourself, whoever's adopting, whoever is the potential adoptive parent, would decide if they're comfortable with everything and if they want to move forward. And like I said, you would move forward, and then if you got matched with that person, great. And then let's say they're 6 months pregnant and you move forward, and let's say you got matched. Let's say by the time all that happened, she's 7 months pregnant. You would have like 2 months to prepare, right? You would know that you're matched, but your birth mother is pregnant, and so you have those 2 months, 3 months, depending how pregnant she is, to prepare for the potential child, and tell family, prepare, and kind of do a nursery, do whatever you want to do to prepare for your adoption. And then once they go into labor, you would be notified and go through the process and sign the paperwork and then go through the post-placement. But there's also a placement that is relatively common from what the agency told us. I think when I asked them how common this second placement is, they told me like 60% of cases happen this way. So that's a pretty big number, the last minute placements.
Oh, last minute, yeah.
Right, 60% of placements are what's considered a last minute placement, which is a completely different process, but not completely different, but it's something that you should definitely be preparing for as a potential adoptive parent. And it's something that we didn't know could even happen that way until we learned about the adoption process.
Could just get a call and say like, hey, you have a match, or do you want to take this case? And then it becomes like the whole process just accelerates right there in that moment.
Well, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So the second scenario is a last minute placement. Like I said, a good chunk of them are last minute placements because it may take a birth mother or birth parent or whoever's doing the adoption time to make that decision, or they may not make that decision until they actually give birth. And so essentially a last minute placement, what's wrong? A last minute placement is essentially that. Someone who has given birth already and is in the hospital usually, and the baby is X days old, so 1 day old, 2 days old, maybe hours old, and this person has given birth. Maybe they have been going back and forth on the decision the whole pregnancy and didn't fully make the decision until they met their child, or maybe I've heard a few cases where they didn't know they were pregnant and then they wanted to make an adoption plan, or maybe they just weren't able to make an adoption plan until the birth. Whatever the case, the person has given birth and is now in the hospital and has asked a nurse to get like a social worker. The social worker will get in contact with an agency, and the agency will get in contact with expected adoptive parents like we were. But in this case, the child's already born, and so the case is, this is all the information we have. The child's already born, and usually you only have a very short window to make the decision whether or not you're going to move forward on the case. And usually in cases like that, they don't show a big batch of people because this person doesn't have a lot of time to make that decision. They show a very small batch, maybe 1 or 2. They call both of those families. They say, this is a very last minute placement. Maybe you have to pick up that baby in a matter of hours or a day, 24 hours or so. 24 hours is probably the max, and because it has to be done, I think they like to have the paperwork. You want to talk about it too? I think in that case, because the baby's already born and birth mom's already postpartum, they like to have the paperwork legally signed, and obviously you go home with your adopted child, all of that before birth mom is discharged from the hospital. And in our country, you don't stay in the hospital long when you give birth. And so that happens quickly, and so that could be, you have a very short amount of time to make the decision, and then you kind of just pick up the child, papers get signed very quickly, and you get thrown into again with the teething, you get thrown into the process in that case. And so in that case, You just have to kind of be prepared for that as a possibility, and that is something that on your profile grid as intended adoptive parents you say if you're open to or not. So some people cannot or do not want to deal with like a last minute placement. They want to be able to plan for those, because you're already planning quickly when you're doing an adoption, because you don't have the 9 months to prepare. You're not the one who's pregnant. And so some people want those 2 or 3 months or a few weeks or whatever while the birth mom is still pregnant to be able to plan. Maybe they just don't have the means in their family to do such a last minute kind of placement, and so that is part of your grid. You can say no to those placements.
Yes.
However, 60% is a big number, and so a lot of people try to figure out how they can be open to that, just because you don't want to have 60% of cases not open to you.
Right, and then there's also a way that the agency, like if you say you're open to those cases and then the agency feels like you're not really being honest about it, or like,
Yeah.
then they'll have a full on conversation with you and say like maybe you need to switch your profile, or maybe when you first sign up with the agency, remember what I said in the last video about read the fine print when it comes to financing your adoption? Read the fine print on everything, because this agencies do have rights too. So if they feel you're not being honest and in the best interest of the child, if they feel like that it's not worth it, then they'll just dismiss you as a client. So it is within their power and right to do so. So make sure
the fine print.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not being honest. Sometimes it's just when you get these profile calls, it is like that life-changing moment, or it can be that life-changing moment, and sometimes it's hard to make that decision on a snapshot. It's not right for everybody. Last minute placement's not right for everybody. We were open to it, but we already kind of had our nursery not completely set up, but set up enough to where I felt comfortable if we were to get a last minute placement. We already had some baby clothes and things. Honestly, we had been going through the infertility journey for years, and so we had been slowly kind of preparing mentally and physically and emotionally for a child for so many years that I felt completely comfortable if we got a last minute placement. I felt like it was a very chaotic story, it was interesting. It would be an interesting way to become a parent, but I felt like we could do it, and I felt comfortable saying, sure, I'll bring a baby home in 24 hours. It would be chaotic for sure, and we would have to like get our stuff together, but I feel like we would be able to do that. But it's not right for everybody. So if it's not right for you, definitely don't say it's right on your grid.
Right.
Like anything else, if something's not right for you and your household, just say no to it. You want the right adoption situation for your family and for your situation. But it is a possibility. Like, we thought that was only in the movies, but it is a possibility. Both of them are possibilities. And so when you get a profile call, you either say yes, and like I said, they show the expected birth parent or birth mother, whoever is included in the adoption. Sometimes it's a birth mother and maybe her mom, a birth mother and their partner, a birth mother and it could be a birth mother and a friend, a birth mother all by herself, depends on the situation.
Yes.
And she'll take as long as she can with that decision. So if it's a last minute placement, she doesn't really have she can take a while, but normally in a last minute placement they make a decision, and like I said, within 24 hours everything's kind of in motion. But with the general profile calls, usually a birth mother is usually by the time a birth mother gets to the point where they're looking at potential adoptive parents for their child, they're already usually either in their late to second trimester or third trimester. And the reason that is because even if a birth mother goes to the agency early on in her pregnancy, just like intended adoptive parents have to go through background check and talks with the social workers, just like we have to go through all that paperwork and kind of background, so do they. So they told us that for our agency specifically, I don't know how it is with other agencies, but for our agency, birth moms go through therapy, they go through counseling, they go through background checks, they go through physicals, they hook them up with insurance if they don't have it, they get a family advocate as well as we get a family advocate, and they go through a lot of conversations to make sure that this is what they want to do and that it's being done to the, you know, with everybody's best interest and the child's best interest, and with the birth mother's kind of mental health at the forefront of that. And so let's say she goes to the agency when she's 2 months pregnant saying that she wants to make a birth plan. By the time she goes through all that background stuff, it might be she might now be 7 months pregnant, and you get that profile call that, hey, we have an expectant mom, this is her information, she's 7 months pregnant. And that might also be why somebody ends up with a last minute call too, because maybe they went to the agency when they were like 8 months pregnant, and by the time they went through it, they gave birth, and then now they're making a plan at the hospital.
Timing is everything, and you have to be ready for it.
And that's why also our agency, as well as many other agencies, at least in New York State, but I'm sure in other states as well, they do a lot of advocacy with the hospital to make sure that the nurses, the doctors in labor and delivery, the social workers, the social workers, and everybody kind of knows who to call and what agencies can be called if a woman comes in labor or laboring and saying or does go into labor and then decide that, hey, does anybody know, can I speak to a social worker about an adoption? Like, they know who to call, they know what agencies are in your state, and they know how to get in contact with those agencies. Those agencies have relationships with hospitals, and that's one of the reasons we chose an agency, because the agency has relationships with hospitals and can be in contact and get cases that wouldn't ordinarily be open to you, like in a private adoption. So that's the gist of what a profile call is. I want to, and like I said, there's the general profile call where maybe the birth mother is X months pregnant, and there's also last minute cases. And so you kind of have to prepare yourself. Can you watch this? You kind of have to prepare yourself for both, if you're open to both, and try to be open to both. You know, sometimes last minute stuff or parenting, like unexpected stuff, is just the nature of adoption. Most people I know, including ourselves, were open to last minute placements, and that's just the nature of it. And sometimes in a last minute placement, unless you are the one who is matched, you'll kind of find out after. So we would kind of check in with our agency sometimes when we hadn't heard of a profile call in a while, and we would say, hey, did anybody look at our profile? And our family advocate would tell us, oh yeah, you did get a last minute placement the other day, but the person went with another profile that they saw. Because it's that last minute, so she didn't even have time to call you because you weren't the family that she chose. And so in that case, she only called the family that she chose and told them, hey, you've been matched. And in that case, it's really, hey, this birth mother has chosen you, this is the situation, this is all her information, do you want this case, yes or no? And that's a very quick thing when they already kind of chose you. What's the matter?
You behave?
Hungry? No, you're not hungry, you just ate. Get into the mock calls of it, I wanted to give some advice. It's just a few tips that we were given once you are awaiting family and kind of waiting for those profile calls.
One thing that I learned, that we learned from this, is definitely be open-minded about pretty much everything. We understand like the gut reaction of what you might do, but put all of those reactions, all the misconceptions, all the negative, like literally just put it all aside and just be open-minded. Like, let everything go and just let it flow.
And then one of the other tips we got from one of the family advocates, who's also a adopted parent to 2 of his children, was you will kind of know when it's the right profile call for you.
Yeah.
When it happens. So when you kind of have a feeling when you get that profile call, you know if it's right to say yes or no. So if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not the right call for your family. So don't feel bad if you have to say no to a profile call,
right? Because
that child is going to end up being your child, and you'll know when it's the right thing. You'll know when it's your child, right? You'll know when it's meant for you and meant for your family. And if it's not meant for you, it's okay to say no because it's meant for somebody else. That was the advice. You will know based on your feelings when it is meant for you and when it is meant to move forward with someone and say yes and take that chance, and when it is just not right for you. And if it's not right for you, it's okay to say no because that means it's just meant for somebody else, but your call will come along. Your family will come together how it's meant to come together. The other thing is more of a actual tactical thing, which is keep a book, because so this was our profile book, and we would write down all the information they would give us. And that's because when you get a profile call, literally your world kind of stops. So you're just like living your life, going through the adoption process. Now you're awaiting family. So you're awaiting family, but you're just going about your life after that, because now all the paperwork is done. It kind of gets silent. You go through months and months of paperwork, months and months of like all this work, and then it's kind of like, oh, you're just awaiting family, and you kind of just wait, and then you get these profile calls. Maybe like you get one for 2 weeks, and then you don't hear from them for like 3 months, or it could vary. But when you do get it, this is potentially your child, and so it's very surreal to hear someone like, hey, there's this expected mother who might choose you, and this is what to hear all this information and to kind of hear it in the way of like someone who could potentially be your child, especially when you're going through infertility. It's a lot, and it is a lot of information. Even when I do the mock calls, you're gonna see that it's a lot of information, and so you need somewhere to write that down. And the other reason why you should keep a book is because you might get a profile call that, hey, this expected mom, this is her situation, and she might be 5 months pregnant, and she might not make a decision whether or not she chose you for months and months and months. And so when they call you back and they say, hey, this birth mom didn't choose you, she chose someone else, or this birth mom did choose you, you might not even remember what the case entailed. And so you want that paper, you want to look back at that. And the third reason you need a book is also because sometimes let's say I get a profile call today, and let's say I say, yes, I want to move forward. I'm not matched because the birth mom didn't choose us yet.
Right.
It's just a potential. She's looking at you guys. You're one of the cases she's looking at. And so you can still get other profile calls. And so I think the most we had at one time that we said yes to were like 3 potential that we were waiting to hear back to see if anybody chose us. And so sometimes you're writing down all this information for 3 different cases, and they're so different. And that's what I'm saying. When they call you back and they say, hey, this birth mom didn't choose you guys, she chose another case, another set of parents or whatever, you have to kind of look back and remind yourself exactly which case, and read all of that again. And the other reason is because you can get a profile call anywhere at any time. So sometimes
I was gonna add something to that. Go ahead.
Sometimes we were driving, and so we had this main big book, and then we had like a little book for the car, because our family advocate, who is also an adopted mother and has 3 children, she said that. She said, oh, you can get cases in your car, on vacation, wherever you are, right? And so you have to have something on hand to kind of write it and kind of just be in that moment. It's a very surreal, once you're awaiting family, those profile calls, it's just a very surreal experience. It's very hard to explain unless you've been through it. But that's one of my main tips.
And one thing you have to keep in mind as a family is on your comfort level of how far you want to travel. Because, and by that I mean, like, let's say, okay, you could literally get a call, like Justine said, at any point. So if you are comfortable traveling, let's say, I don't know, to Hawaii, for sake of argument, be mindful that you will probably get a call saying like, oh, your profile got viewed or whatever, so guess what, and that's it. That's not saying that you're matched yet. Matching means that
it's a potential.
It's potentially there. The birth parent has already chosen. If it's matched, the birth parent chose you already. That's it.
Right, and even when you're matched in an adoption, honestly, everything is potential until the papers are signed.
Yes.
When you are matched meaning that the birth mom chose you as the intended adoption parents. But that is still her child legally until she gives birth and signs away their rights.
Yeah.
And so that's what a disruptive placement is. If you get matched and then a birth mom gives birth, let's say you get matched, she's 8 months pregnant, you get matched, you might be waiting that whole month, preparing for that baby that whole month, but then if she gives birth and she doesn't sign the papers, she chooses not to sign the papers, and that's her right, that's her child at that point. If she doesn't sign the papers, then that is considered a disruptive placement, because you were matched already and then didn't get placed. and that happens in adoption, and that's kind of like a risk that you have to be willing to take. We've seen people go through it. It's very painful. We never went through a disruptive placement, but we did go through a failed match where a birth mother who seemed like she was going to match with us chose another family, and we went through that a couple of times. But this one in particular, we went through more of her pregnancy with her because it was one of those cases, as I said earlier, where she was like 5 months pregnant when they called us with the potential case, and then it went down to us and another family, and then it seemed like she was leaning towards us, but then she chose the other family at the last minute. And like I said, that was fate stepping in too, but that baby was definitely meant to be theirs, because the next day we found out we were pregnant with Anna. And then ultimately decided to pause our adoption anyway. And we had kind of, once we got pregnant and we were discussing things, we said it like this: if we were already matched with a child, then we were just gonna have Anna and another child. We weren't gonna like step back from a match that was already matched. But because we weren't matched, that's why we paused the adoption. Had we already been matched, or had we already had our adopted child, it's our child and that's it. And then we're having another child. But because we were in a place where we had been a waiting family for over a year and we weren't matched, we felt comfortable pausing our adoption, focusing on the pregnancy, and revisiting the idea of adoption later. But yeah, it can happen kind of any which way. So now I'm going to kind of go through scenarios, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. And like I said, there's 2 types. So I did 4 scenarios, 2 of which are general placements where the birth mother is like X months pregnant, more of a general match. And then the other ones are what a last minute placement would kind of look like and what those calls would look like. So because we're going to do a mock call, I didn't want to pull our actual calls from our book, because just for confidentiality, like obviously none of those children became our children, and they are somebody else's, and some of those adoptions may or may not have gone through. So for confidentiality, I didn't want to pull from there. So I just made these up based on just how we know they do the profile calls. And again, you only get profile calls on things that you're open to on your grid.
Correct.
Right? But if you say you're absolutely not open to it, you just won't get that call. Like for example, if you say you're not open to an open adoption, you won't get calls with a birth mother who wants an open adoption. On the flip side of that, if you're looking for only an open adoption, you will not get calls with a birth mother who's looking for a closed adoption. If you're not open to twins, then you're not going to get profile calls with twins. But if you are open to twins, it doesn't mean that all your profile calls will just be twins, but if there are twins, you will be part of the batch of people that they can look into, right? So that's kind of how that works when it comes to your grid. And then the birth mom also has things that she's looking for. For example, if she wants a family who's married, then me and Sam would qualify for that person if they also matched all our grid. Right. But if we weren't married, like if I was adopting by myself and the person was looking for a couple that's married, I wouldn't get that call. So it varies. It's a lot. Like I said in the previous video, the grids are like over 100 things that you will and won't be open to, or that you that you will and won't be open to. And then on the birth mom side, it's about the same. So it's a lot of different things, but you will get most of the time profile calls that you are open to. But you still have to discuss each profile call, because you still have to discuss if that exact case and those exact details are right for your family. Right. It's different checking it off on a grid saying I will be open to it versus this will be my potential child, because being open to something and then having it indefinitely is very different. So for the scenarios, I'm gonna play the family, like the adoption counselor, family advocate person that would call you, and Sam is gonna play the part of the adoptive parent that I'm calling. So let's say a birth mother came in, and now I'm the adoption, I'm Sam's family advocate, and let's say now I told you the birth mom on their side has a family advocate. So now this birth mom is with the agency, has gone through all the preliminary stuff, and now the birth mother's family advocate would get in touch with me, because I'm a family advocate for the adoptive parents, and tell me the case, and I would relay that to my client, who is the adoptive parent. So let's say I call Sam up and I do scenario 1, which is I said we have a case with a birth mother who's 7 months pregnant with a baby, And then let's say in this scenario, it's a baby girl. She is 27 years old and lives in the New York area. She is blank race, so they'll give whatever race the birth mother is. And then I said the birth father is blank race, so they'll give you whatever race the birth parent is. Some people are open to interracial adoption, some people are not, depending on your grid. And so they just give you the race and they give you the age. So I said 27. Let's say birth father's like 28. And this is her second pregnancy. She's already parenting a 3-year-old girl. She wants to make an adoption plan because she feels already, she feels that she is already financially strained as a parent and cannot provide adequately for both children. And then I said her pregnancy is relatively healthy, so they'll also give you, like, if it's somebody who's pregnant versus somebody who gave birth, they'll just give you generally the medical records that have been on their appointment. So is the baby generally healthy, or is there anything that you should know health-wise? So in this scenario, I said the baby is generally healthy, but the mom does have gestational diabetes. She's looking for a closed adoption. So then if Sam said yes to the case, let's say you said
So yes.
so, well, you wouldn't say yes right off the bat, right? Because she's 7 months pregnant.
Correct.
We usually, like for us, we usually would say okay, and then our agency, in this case, it's not a last minute placement. So she would say, think about it. Sometimes if it was like a Friday, she would say, think about it for the weekend, talk about it, think about it for the day, whatever, call me back, because we have time. She's 7 months pregnant.
Hold that thought. So you mentioned something right now, like, so in this case, it's not like the movies, guys. So like when you get a profile call, 95% of the time they'll say, take the night to think it over. Right. It's not like, come to the hospital right now.
Yeah, she's 7 months pregnant.
Yeah, like that's not happening.
It's not a last minute placement.
It's very rare that it happens like the movies or the TV show or whatever. Very rarely will you pick up the phone and they say, "Oh, come pick up the baby like now."
However, we do know people that happen.
However, it has happened. It's not out of the realm of possibilities.
As we said earlier.
Yeah. However, 95% of the time is literally you get a call. Oh, talk about it with your partner first, and then okay, if the answer is yes, okay, then all the pieces start moving. But right, that even if it's like a last minute, come pick up the baby in an hour, they still give you time to talk about it because it's still a decision.
Right. So in this case, since she's 7 months pregnant, let's say me and Sam, usually when we would get a profile call that wasn't a last minute placement or anything like that, we would take like maybe 2-3 days. We would really talk about it and think about it. So we would get back to her within like 72 hours or so. And a lot of times our agency, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was like the day that they met with birth parents or whatever, if there was a specific day, but most of the time it was like on a Thursday or Friday, so we would just get back to her on like the following Monday or whatever. And sometimes, depending on the case, certain profile cases, depending on how much information was in it, we had to like really talk and take those 2-3 days. And certain things, we talked about it and we knew right off the bat, yes or no. We are like, this is not right for us, and we just have to tell our family advocate, unfortunately, we're not going to move forward. Please move it on to a different family. Or we knew right off the bat, no, we want to move forward with this case and see if our birth mom matches with us. So some things was like maybe like half an hour conversation, but some things took a while. So let's say you said yes. In this case, let's say he was married still, like we were. You talk about it as a family, partner, whatever, and then if you said yes, you would move forward, and if the birth mother chose you, then you would move forward to following her with her pregnancy, meeting them, normally meeting them if they wanted to, but normally I think most birth mothers wanted to meet the families beforehand, and then once they give birth, like I said, signing the paperwork, all of those things. If you said no, the family advocate would ask why, and and the reason they would ask why is because they want to know, is it just this specific case that you don't feel right about, or is it something in this case that you are not open to, that maybe didn't come up on the grid, or something that you are not open to that you thought you'd be open to, so that we don't keep giving you cases with the same situation, right?
Because you also don't want to be put into the position where, or be one of those people where the answer is like, oh no, because you see that it doesn't seem like you're picky, but what are you really trying to establish here? Right. You're looking to start a family, therefore you have to be, like I said, be willing and open to everything.
But I could say some things in this particular scenario where maybe some people wouldn't be open to it. So one thing that I've heard other people say with a case like this, we were open to it, but other people may not be, was I said this was her second pregnancy. She's already parenting a 3-year-old girl. And some people don't want a birth mother who has other biological children because they don't want to deal with their adopted child, like, not knowing the siblings, especially because she's looking for a closed adoption. In the case where a birth mother has other children and has an open adoption, a lot of times you can ask if they're going to have the open adoption with their other children, and your adopted child will have a relationship, and if you're comfortable with that, that's great. But in this case, since it's a closed adoption, some people may not want her to have other siblings because they may not want to navigate, like, oh yeah, you have other birth siblings, but you can't meet them, and they may not feel comfortable with that. Another thing is the whole health thing. Gestational diabetes is pretty common, and a lot of the way the agency talk to us about health things is like, if you know that you yourself could get pregnant and have this complication, then you know you're going to be open to it, because even if you got pregnant, you could have complications yourself. But you're only going to be open to things that you're open to. If you're not comfortable, like I said, you have to say what's right for you and your family. Some people may not want to take the risk with some of the risks that come with a pregnancy with gestational diabetes, so you might say no. Or it might just be a feeling that this case is not right for you. That is your right, and like I said, you will know when the case is right for you. You will feel it in your heart, and you will know when it's right to move forward with someone and when for whatever reason it's not right. So in all, even though you don't want to always say no, you want to keep an open mind, and you want to be honest on that grid so that you're getting cases that you are mostly open to. If there's something that comes up that's a red flag for you, or you just don't sit right, you want to be comfortable saying no, and just know that that child's meant for someone else and yours will come along. Scenario number 2 is also, like I said, I did 4 scenarios, 2 of which were like normal placements and 2 of which were to show you what a last minute placement would be like. So now scenario number 2 is also a normal placement, but the scenario is a little bit different, so I wanted to show you the difference. So let's say, again, I'm a family advocate. I'm calling Sam and his wife, who are potential adoptive parents, and I'm saying I have a case with a birth mother who's 5 months pregnant, so this one has a little bit more time, right? With a baby, we don't know the gender yet. So sometimes you may not know the gender till the baby is born, because a lot of people who are placing their child for adoption maybe don't want to know the gender. We kind of dealt with that, where there was a birth mom who wasn't going to find out the gender, and so we weren't going to know the gender until the baby was born. In this case, she's 5 months pregnant, so they might tell you, we don't know the gender yet, we're not sure if she's going to find out or she's not going to find out. But in this case, you're saying yes to a profile without knowing the gender. She's 22 years old, she's in college, it's her first pregnancy, healthy mom, healthy baby. She has not disclosed any information about the birth father, and then they'll say her race. She is looking for an open adoption where she would be able to write letters and receive letters and have 2 in-person visits a year.
Yes.
So that would be like a case, right? And again, if she's 5 months pregnant, so again, you have time to discuss it. It's not a last minute placement. If you said yes, discuss it with your partner. Like I said, 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever. Get back to your agency and say yes. And again, if you're matched, she could take a while because she's 5 months pregnant. So sometimes if you're saying that yes to a potential case with somebody who is earlier in their pregnancy, a lot of times you are going to wait longer for that decision, because they're not going to make that decision until they're further along, which again, we went through that. That's how we ended up with the case where we went through that long stretch with a birth mother who eventually chose a different family. I think she was about 4 or 5 months pregnant when we got the initial call.
She was, give or take.
Yeah, and then but if he was to say no, again, they would ask why. And in this scenario, there are a few things where some families, it might not be right for you. In every scenario, there's cases where it might not be right. But some people, and again, this has to do with the grid as well, some people may not want she's not disclosing information about the birth father. And in New York State, they don't have to. And in New York State, actually, a birth father, it's a little bit, the rights of the birth father are a little,
It's weird. Remember when we said, like, I think it was last video, a couple videos back, check your local laws, and
Right.
it's important because there's a lot of like.
But one thing
things that go
is,
into this.
one thing is with a birth father. Let's say there's somebody who does know that their girlfriend or their ex-girlfriend, whoever, is pregnant, and is looking into adoption. He has to be actively involved in the pregnancy to have any rights and say in
Yeah,
that.
something like
He
that.
has to be financially like helping her with the pregnancy and showing involvement with the pregnancy. If he's not, then he's like automatically seen as like abandonment, even though the baby's not born in New York State anyway.
Yes.
That's what they told us.
And I think finish, and then I think I have to do the ad.
Yeah, so that might be a reason why somebody might say no to this. The other reason might be that she's looking for an open adoption with letters, and like the open adoption can be different things. So you make an agreement when you do an open adoption, and it has to the adoptive parents and the birth parents both have to agree on exactly the terms of their open adoption. So every open adoption looks different. Sometimes it's 2 visits a year, sometimes it's letters, pictures, sometimes it's no visits. It might just be letters and pictures, things like that. So you make an agreement and you sign. It's actually a legal document. But that's what they're looking for. That's what they told the agency, and so you have to be open to their initial what they're looking for at least.
So a little while ago, I said something about location. One of the things to keep in mind, especially with that, is when you get these profile calls, they'll also tell you more or less where the birth mother or birth parents reside, whether it's in New York State or whether it's in, I don't know, like Florida or Ohio. They'll tell you, give or take, where it is, in which case there are other laws to be mindful as well. Like, it could be in Pennsylvania, it could be Connecticut, it doesn't matter. Even though your laws are still going to apply, you have to also look up the laws for that particular state, because not all states agree, and in that kind of scenario, it can get sticky if the agency is trying to be the facilitator of this whole case overall. So be mindful. Check the local laws. Ask a lot of questions. Do not hesitate on the questions. Always ask.
And if you're dealing with an agency that does do adoptions in multiple states, because that was our case, you can say whether or not you're open to that. So you can, let's say you're in the New York area, but your agency deals with like 4 different states. You can say that you're open to all of those states.
Yes.
Or you can say, no, we want to keep our adoption only in the New York area, or you can pick and choose what states you're open to based on their laws, because there might be certain laws that you're not comfortable with. I'm not going to get into specifics, but
That's fine.
there are states that we chose that do work with our agency that we chose not to be open to because we weren't comfortable with some of the laws towards adoptive parents, and sometimes we weren't comfortable with some of the laws towards birth parents, because you want your birth mother to be treated fairly, and sometimes I wasn't comfortable with certain laws that were on the books for that either, because this was a woman who was giving us their child and they needed to be treated fairly, and if I felt like they weren't going to be treated fairly, I wasn't going to work with that state, put it that way. Scenario 3, so the next 2 scenarios are showing what a last minute placement looks like, and it's 2 different scenarios, so it's kind of very different. Every profile case is going to look totally different. You could get a profile case every month for 6 months while you're being a waiting family, and even if they have similarities, like even if they're all in your grid, like I said, even if you get no last minute placements, you get all regular cases with somebody who's 6 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant, the little nitty gritty details of everybody's life and situation are so different, and so you have to discuss every time you get a case. So the third one, which would be a last minute placement, they would tell you right off the bat, we have a last minute placement with a birth mother. I said in this scenario, she's 18, this is her first pregnancy, and then again, they'll tell you the race, the father's race, if they disclose it, and then in this case, I said the father has not been involved, but knows about the pregnancy, baby is healthy, but premature, 36 weeks, the baby is in the NICU, small but healthy, breathing on their own, was jaundiced at birth, but is improving. Mother is looking for a semi-open adoption, but where she is able to receive pictures and letters and emails throughout the year. And then they will kind of tell you, you know, since the baby's already been born. So in this case, I said the baby has already been born and is 2 days old. So this is somebody who gave birth and kind of was thinking about adoption. Probably what, and then before their discharge, they are looking into it. If the baby's 2 days old, that means they're looking to discharge this person pretty soon, and so this is going to be a pretty last minute placement. And there has been cases in our agency and experiences very similar to this one. In that case, what did she say? Like a few hours. You get a few hours to discuss.
So either way, like I said before, you will still get even a few hours to decide, because
Right.
even on the most pressing of cases, you get a few hours because you need time to be able to sort things over.
But usually they will tell you, like, we're looking to sign the papers at whatever time, because they have to sign the papers before discharge normally. I think there are special circumstances where that could be, like, worked on.
Yeah.
But really and truly, you don't want to not sign the papers before discharge, because just as like on the adoptive parent side, you want to protect yourself as well, and you don't want to go home with a baby and then they decide not to sign, and then you have to like relinquish that baby after you've already taken them home. So you want the papers to be signed before you bring your child home.
Yes.
You want the child to be your child legally before you bring the child home. So in this scenario, I said that they were trying to sign the papers before 9 p.m. So let's say normally we wouldn't get a call after like 5 o'clock normally.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, yeah.
So let's say they called us at like 2 in the afternoon. We had a few hours, if in this scenario, if we wanted to say yes to a case like this, just discuss it, call them back, and kind of make our way to the hospital, because it was a last minute placement. And then if you said no, you weren't comfortable with maybe the fact that the baby was premature or something like that, if you said no, then they just move on to another family, and in that case, you know, it is a last minute placement, so they would be looking for someone that day, right? And then the last scenario is also an example of a last minute placement, and I said, but the scenario is a little bit different. So I said birth mother has had twins, healthy. I said blank weeks, so twins are normally born early, and so if you're open to twins, know that they're normally born early, like 35, 36 weeks. And then I said birth mother's race, whatever, they'll tell you the race. Birth father's race, they'll tell you the race. She's 28, he's 28. They don't feel ready to financially support a child together, but they want to both be a part of an open adoption, 2 visits a year. 1 to 2 visits a year is standard in an open adoption that wants visits. So that's just standard. So that's why I put that in there, because normally more than 2 visits a year, there can be open adoptions that want more than 2 visits a year. Or as you go about your open adoption, it might get less strict on what what was agreed upon, and you might be open to just involving that person more in your life. It depends. I've seen a lot of different scenarios.
You are getting to know one another.
Exactly.
It's not like, okay, it's a supervised visit here, you have them for an hour.
Yeah, it's not like that.
It's not like that. You literally have time to like, you
well,
actually get to know over coffee, go to the park. It depends on the overall.
Yeah, to us, we didn't want that. We wanted, when we were going through the adoption process, we were very open to an open adoption. And we wanted basically an open adoption where we could have a close-knit relationship with the birth mother or the birth parents or whoever was going to be part of an open adoption, and basically make her a part of our family because she was giving us her child, and letting us raise her child as our child. And we just felt like if she's looking for an open adoption, that we were okay with having our child fully know their birth family. And so, but I said open adoptions can look very different ways, and so you can kind of know what you're, just because you're not comfortable, you know, having the birth mother be like an extended part of your family doesn't mean that you can't be open to open adoption. But if you are, then you are. But in that scenario, that was twins, like I said. So that's a big part of your grid too. They ask you if you're open to multiples. If you're not, you won't get multiple calls.
And notice how the key word is multiples, because it's not out of the realm of possibilities that you could get a call for the agencies do handle triplets, but that's rare. Those are very rare.
Our agency had told us, I had asked that question about, because it just said, our agency, I think it just said twins. And then I had asked, what about triplets or something like that? And our agency had told us that they have never placed triplets, but it wasn't out of the realm of possibility. And so if they were to get triplets, they would only show to people who said they were open to twins and then tell you, hey, it's triplets, are you open to this? And we kind of joked around like we'd probably be the first ones to have triplets, but you know, here we are. But yeah, so in that case, you know, somewhat people have to be open to twins to get this case, so they probably wouldn't say no based on the fact that they're twins. But they might have their reasons. They might not be ready. They also talk to you about what the finances are going to look like for that final payment, because usually it looks about the same, but based on birth parent expenses and things like that, it can be like a little bit lower, a little bit higher, depending on the case. And so sometimes you might have to say no just based on finances, even especially in a last minute placement. And that's why in our video about affording your adoption, I said, even though you might not want to take out adoption loans, sometimes in those last minute placements, if you need that last minute money, it becomes one of your only options, because it's so last minute. And
again, even like last thing on the financial part, as for now, is if you for some reason can't get like the adoption loans are like are not the best in terms of size or what you may need, talk to your banking institution. A lot of them, they're very receptive, and they just and they want to help you out too. They're not very closed off to the fact. So just talk to them. The worst that they can say is no, unfortunately we don't offer it here, but the best thing is that they'll try to connect you. Number one, they'll try to give you the loan in general, but if not, they'll try to connect you somewhere where you could go.
Right.
So there's always a way.
So that's just a little tip, because your financial information is part of the profile call.
Yes, everything.
They tell you exactly how much, you know, the birth parent expenses are going to be, exactly how much, you know, certain expenses are going to break down to for the specific case. Like I said, it's normally within the same ballpark, but it can vary depending on state. So where does the birth mother reside? Because certain states have different limits to that. And it also can differentiate. Twins is an extra cost.
Yes.
Twins is about,
it's only like the twins only like, I'm gonna say this number, this is like 5% of what the overall thing is.
Right.
So it's not gonna cost you two placements. It's not gonna
it's not like double, but it's an added price. It's like a little bit more. So they'll tell you, oh, it's twins, so it's gonna be a little bit more, blah blah blah. So they do tell you the financial part. But if you guys want more information on the finance part, we did that video last week, so I can link it below. You can also watch our video on financing adoption. But this was just because once we became a waiting family, I felt like there wasn't a lot of information about what placement calls were like, or what it was like to be a waiting family. And even though this video is about the placement calls, I want to say this about being a waiting family too, because when you're getting placement calls, you are a waiting family, and you could be a waiting family. The longest I've heard people wait in the adoption community is like 4 years, honestly.
Give or take.
But you could also wait like
a month.
And
you would never know.
It really, really varies, because you never know when you're going to get matched. You could be really, really lucky and get matched like 2 weeks after once you're home study approved, you can get profile calls.
Yeah.
And so you could be really, really lucky and be amazing and get your, profile call within like a week of getting home study approved, and within 3 weeks, boom, you're matched, and you could have an amazing story. It's possible, but people also wait, and throughout that wait, you're gonna get profile calls, and it's really hard when you get this potential and you say yes, and now in your head you're like, oh, I could have a baby, and you're just excited, and then you get the call that they went with a different family.
Right.
And maybe eventually I'll do a whole video on like how to cope with being a waiting family, because we did do things to kind of cope with that. And again, we were dealing with infertility for 3 years, so it was like a whole another emotional journey. Adoption's a whole nother emotional journey, and it can be a lot. But just try to, like I said, be as honest with you as you can. Have the conversation every time you get a profile call, even if it's a last minute placement and you have to say, well, we have to have this conversation right away, we have to sit down for the next 2 hours and really talk about it. Do it, because this is going to be your potential child, And once that papers are signed, like I said, they become your child. This is a huge life decision. This is a life altering decision. So even if it's gonna happen in a snapshot or not in the way you intended or in some serendipitous way, it's gonna happen.
Yes.
And so you want to talk about it. If you guys have any more questions about what placement's like or what being a waiting family is like, just drop them in the comments if we didn't answer them. I hope showing the little tips and scenarios kind of helped show a little bit of what it's like. Also, if you have any other adoption questions in general that we haven't answered in any of the adoption videos that we've already done, we can answer them in the comments, or if we get a lot of them, we'll probably just make a video on it.
Sounds good.
Remember
Remember to like, share, subscribe, drop a comment, like we said, and you know, tell everyone. It is Adoption Awareness Month, and it's it's just a very exciting time to be here, especially for adoption. Okay, bye.